Imagine what it would be like in 2,000 years if we continue to advance as we are advancing. Flying cars traveling to distant stars, the end of human suffering, are all probably things that will happen in the next 200 years. But what about in 2,000 years? This is where we could be now if things had been done slightly differently in one place, Alexandria. The ancient city of Alexandria reached a level of development probably comparable in different ways to where Europe was roughly 2,000 years later. Philosophy is the study of knowledge. The word breaks down into the Greek roots, phil meaning love and soph meaning wisdom, which was coined by the Greek Pythagoras, also inventor of the Pythagorean theorem used in geometry. A PhD is a doctor of philosophy in a field of expertise, therefore a lover of wisdom in that field. Many of those living in early Alexandrian times had the goal to understand everything. This was the original definition of philosophy. Alexander and the first three Ptolemies understood how to develop a place where such thinking could prosper. But I don't feel they really asked the questions on a grander scale. That would have been, how can humanity best know all it can know? This would have been an even greater extension of the love of wisdom. I believe, had the 88 years of the Golden Age been expanded to about 400, then they would have reached levels beyond what we now have reached. This would have been by the year 100 AD or CE. Why was expansion, or even preservation of the Golden Age, not an important goal? I would think the original intention of this would have been ensured. They should have developed a template at what they believed was responsible for developing the learning center of Alexandria and what they saw as the challenges to it. This should have been a priority, but was not. The first three Ptolemy kings, those of the Golden Age, upheld Alexander's vision. The others did not. But even they could have done much more. What if they had the intention of developing more people like Archimedes, Euclid, Aristarchus, Hipparchus, Eratosthenes, and Erasistratus? These are just a few of the many of the greatest minds in history who were present in the Golden Age of Alexandria. Maybe Alexandria should have better understood how such individuals develop. What if these individuals were presented to children as those they should emulate, marketed to them as we today market individuals who are professional athletes, musicians, or others on various media platforms? History or society never really values its great thinkers, not to the extent it should. It doesn't seem the library and its knowledge were well known among its population. Then that means it did not serve as an influence to the masses, and the masses then were not developed as well as they could have been. Also, karma would turn on the Greeks for having slaves, as the Greeks, a short time later, were enslaved by the Romans. Alexander's generals, after his death, went to war with one another. That's not surprising, as it was greed and the quest for power that drove Alexander. And this is how he drove his generals. Even in academic pursuits, they were greedy. Pergamon was a rival library to Alexandria, located in what is now southwest Turkey. This was a vassal state under the Seleucid Empire, founded by Seleucus, another of Alexander's generals. The early Ptolemy kings of Alexandria refused to export papyrus to the Seleucid Empire, as papyrus was used to make paper, and paper, of course, is used to make books. Alexandria made sure to do nothing to add to Pergamon's intellectualism. This then slowed the potential growth of both Alexandria and the Seleucid Empire. It took the U.S. less than 67 years to go from the Wright brothers making the first flight in an airplane to us landing on the moon. John F. Kennedy gave a speech on September 12, 1962, proclaiming we would land a man on the moon by the end of the decade, despite having no idea how to do it. This is the type of leadership that Alexander and the first three Ptolemy rulers had. They asked and pursued complex questions, engaged in grand projects, and ambitiously sought to understand what and where they did not understand. This is the type of thinking that keeps a civilization developing as it should. The Golden Age of Alexandria had an understanding of distances such as the circumference of the earth, the distance to the moon and the sun. They understood what stars were and that they were of immense distance. Geometry, trigonometry, and integral calculus were discovered during that time. Mathematics was brought to the point of analytical geometry, the math used in aviation and space flight. The steam engine was invented after the Golden Age, but by the momentum of the Golden Age. Countless devices were created, often said to be the first computers. However, it was unlikely these devices stored information, which is one of the definitions of the modern computer. If they didn't store information, I believe they were close to figuring that out too. I believe it would have taken an expanded Golden Aged Alexandria, maybe 300 to 400 years, possibly less, to do space travel. Maybe as soon as the year 100, but by the year 200. Had Alexandria, during an enhanced and expanded Golden Age, asked the question, pursued the answer, and implemented the answer of how we can grow at an even greater rate, then I think it likely that space travel and the answer to other advancements would have happened. This increased trajectory may well have them having figured out how to travel to distant stars and back by the year 200 to 300 AD. The Chinese had already considered the concept of flight before Alexandria and used kites for multiple reasons. Alexander's conquest had come to the edge of China. Had the generals, who stayed divided, minimally stayed in touch, then Alexandria would have been familiar with China's understanding of flight. Maybe they were aware of this, but it was certainly without collaboration. Instead, we today are nowhere close to traveling to distant stars and back. Perhaps we will do that in 100 to 150 years. That is assuming we stay on trajectory and maybe that we collaborate. That then is 2,000 years after it might have been done in Alexandria. The concept of democracy was invented by the Greeks under Cleisthenes, about 2,000 years before the beginning of Alexandria's Golden Age. The word democracy comes from the Greek roots of demos, meaning the people, and kratos, meaning strength. So democracy means strength of the people. A prolonged Golden Age would have likely added a great deal to political science, economics, and the concept of justice. An enlightened system would have been more self-running. Once a given level in political structure would have been reached, then the importance of leaders would have diminished greatly. When a more self-running political system would have been created, then I believe the trajectory for advancement in all areas would have been increased. There would not be the inconsistency of or being dependent on leaders. History has been full of totalitarian rulers, and totalitarian rulers have their own interest at hand. Development of the civilization is not one of their interests. Please subscribe to the channel and like this episode. Thank you so much for watching.